In April 2013, between $4 and $6 billion evaporated from eastern India. Over 1.7 million people lost their life savings. The sudden collapse of the Saradha Group wiped out entire communities, leaving severe destitution in its wake. In the immediate aftermath of the crash, over 200 victims took their own lives. We tend to imagine billion-dollar financial crimes happening in secret, hidden behind encrypted servers or in offshore tax havens. But this operation utilized public storefronts, printed daily newspapers in 5 languages, and sponsored massive political rallies. The architects of the Saradha Group didn't hide their wealth, they broadcasted it. Operating in the harsh glare of the public spotlight was the exact psychological mechanism they used to manufacture the trust required to pull off the fraud. To understand how the scam grew so large, we have to look at the daily reality of eastern India's rural communities. Across the region, hundreds of millions of low-income citizens lived entirely outside the formal banking sector, yet they still needed a secure place to deposit their wages, grow their money, and borrow for critical life events, like buying seeds for the harvest or paying for a child's marriage. The state failed to provide basic financial infrastructure for its most vulnerable citizens. Saradha filled that vacuum, weaponizing a desperate demographic's need for financial security. This network graph shows how Chairman Sudipto Sen structured his empire. When regulators from the Securities and Exchange Board of India first investigated him in 2009, Sen splintered the company into over 200 interconnected shell corporations to obscure the money trail. As regulators persisted, Saradha abandoned its initial secured debentures. Sen shifted to selling fraudulent collective investment schemes, disguising them as tourism packages, luxury hotel timeshares, and real estate ventures. The operation was fueled by a massive pyramid of local sales agents drawn from the very villages they targeted. Between 25% and 40% of every deposit was instantly diverted to pay these agents lucrative commissions. The aggressive incentive structure caused an explosion in cash flow. 95% of the billions stolen were collected in just the final 3 years of the scam. By constantly mutating its corporate structure and product lines, a blatant Ponzi scheme managed to outpace the regulatory bodies trying to map it. Financial obfuscation was only half the strategy. Saradha engaged in massive cultural infiltration to buy public trust. The group pumped money into the Bengali film industry, sponsored rival heritage football clubs like Mohun Bagan and East Bengal, and bankrolled local religious festivals. They spent nearly $100 million acquiring media properties. By 2013, Saradha employed 1,500 journalists and owned 8 newspapers and multiple television channels to control the regional narrative. They even recruited the local political elite. Sitting members of parliament from the ruling Trinamool Congress Party were hired as media CEOs and brand ambassadors, publicly encouraging citizens to invest. When a company owns your daily newspaper, sponsors your favorite football team, and employs your elected officials, it projects an illusion of state-sanctioned invincibility. That illusion effectively neutralized public skepticism. This graph highlights the fatal flaw of every Ponzi scheme. The exact moment when the cash required to pay old investors exceeds the cash coming in from new ones. For Saradha, those lines crossed in January 2013. The internal cash crisis triggered a panic. Depositors demanded their returns, and Sudipto Sen scrambled to generate new capital, completely failing to calm his increasingly uneasy network of agents. On April 6th, Sen reached his breaking point. He drafted an 18-page confessional letter to federal investigators, explicitly naming the politicians and elites who had taken his money. 4 days later, he fled to a mountain resort in Kashmir, abandoning the empire to its fate. Political protection and media control can extend the lifespan of a fraud, but they cannot rewrite the mathematical certainty that a Ponzi structure will eventually run out of money and collapse. Sen's disappearance sparked violent protests across Bengal. Agents and depositors besieged the company's offices, ultimately prompting the Supreme Court of India to order a massive federal investigation. The shield of legitimacy was torn down. Transport ministers, former directors general of police, and sitting members of parliament were dragged into federal custody. The Saradha scandal represents a catastrophic failure of institutional integrity. Millions of people lost their financial futures because an elite class of politicians and regulators allowed a massive fraud to operate in plain sight, extracting the cost of their corruption directly from India's most impoverished citizens.